to a great degree about the empowerment that's happening with neighborhood associations. They didn't understand what this is all about, essentially, and we came to some agreements in this discussion that everybody needs to play by the rules. Neighborhood associations, if they are organized properly and if they want to contribute properly, ought to also have adequate minutes. They ought to be responsible for the decisions that they make, but that this also ought to be across the board. That is, the development community and the business community ought to subscribe to the same guidelines that the neighborhood association community subscribes to. I guess that's where I want to start with this in terms of empowerment, because to me that was the essence of the leadership and empowerment segment that I suggested to them. That is, how do you feel about this? There are obviously neighborhood associations are gaining their legs, so to speak. I mean, the city council to some degree is supporting these groups. We have a suggestion and some staff reports that suggest that we have to support these groups in terms of bringing them along. How do you see this balance, and where do you think we're going with this issue in terms of empowering not only the business community but also the neighborhood association community, the citizen community?
Well, Carl, I think that where we start probably ought to be looking at where we are. Currently, in this community, we have numerous citizen-based groups who represent the different neighborhoods, and they've been recognized for some time by the city in an official capacity and are allowed to form. The problem is at this point in time, however, there are different levels of competency among those groups that are all recognized with equal, that there is no distinction between them. This group represents this neighborhood, this group represents this neighborhood. Some do it better than others. I live in the grasslands. Our neighborhood association has been remarkably active for years, not only when there is a problem at City Hall or we want to come protest something or support something, but also just in terms of neighborhood communication. When we have a system in place where if a note or a notice or a ballot or a vote is to take place, within 3 days, everyone in the neighborhood gets a personal invitation that is dropped at their door. We have 100% contact with the residents of our neighborhood. East Campus is fairly well organized as well. There are some that don't even know if they're officially chartered or not. And before I think we go wholesale saying we're going to give a broad brush of recognition to all of these groups, I think that what you pointed out is that there needs to be some codification and some expectation that this will be professional, that it will be broad in its representation and not isolated or singular in its representation. For instance, you have 2 loud people in one neighborhood. They should not necessarily carry the day, even if they are the only ones who are willing to stand up and go to the meeting. It needs to be broader than that. And that's where I think we need to start there.
The problem with that idea is that you start to introduce controls into a populist political system of neighborhood associations. And this idea that there are different varying levels of competency is true anywhere you go. It's true in government, it's true in private business, and it's true in neighborhood associations. So to ask all of the various neighborhood associations, many of which represent very poor communities, to meet certain levels of competency, I think it would have the tendency to drain a lot of the spirit out of these kinds of discussions and debates. And I don't like this idea that certain loud individuals need to be somehow silenced or fettered in some way. The reason for that is that those loud individuals form a critical check and balance in a community like this. The problem is that a lot of them get dismissed as cranks and crackpots and whatnot by the people that don't subscribe to that. You were part of this. You've been one of them. And so And not every neighborhood association can be like the Grasslands, because the Grasslands is a community of citizens that are a little bit higher income than
Or
ours.
East Campus, or Benton Stevens. We can pick any of those. We shouldn't
Exactly,
just pick
but-
on the
but
Grasslands
I-
as being economically advantaged.
Well, North
But-
Central has a very active neighborhood association
That's
that
right.
is economically disadvantaged.
I
So, in a lot of places.
Let me say this. I mean, there is this dialogue going on about empowerment of neighborhood associations and the extent to which they can answer questions that the development community or people that bring applications before the Planning and Zoning Commission and the City Council, how they can answer. These are quasi-governmental bodies, essentially. The problem here, I see, is that there aren't many rules. You know, but frankly, there aren't. That is, the rules about making sure that you have the right kinds of minutes, making sure that you can account for the number of votes that you had, making sure that the questions are reported, making sure this is all public knowledge. But the flip side of this is that the development community and the business community has to be held to the same standard. I don't have a problem with empowering neighborhood associations if I can empower the business community and the development community in the same way. That is, they all too have to subscribe to minutes, and they have to subscribe to the votes, and they have to subscribe to the open meetings. There are a lot of situations where the business community meets with the city staff to agree to, in terms of agreements or getting towards agreements, that is very confidential. Those things are not, those are, and that's a lot of contact that occurs before a lot of the public has any idea about what's going on. Now, I appreciate confidentiality, and when you're talking about dollars and some of the contracts that we're talking about,
That's right.
I think that's an important thing. I mean,
Land
we have to pay some attention to that. But I do think that if we are going to embrace this engagement concept, which I think is in the best interest of this community in the long run, we have to have the same rules from the business community that we do have to have for the neighborhood associations.
Well, if the business community is recognized by the city as an entity that has standing, much like it's being proposed to do for neighborhood associations, that would be true. But what we're not going to do, and I don't think it would be wise, and I don't think anybody would agree to it, is to say that if there is a corporation that wants to make a proposal that is going to impact a neighborhood in some manner, that they would have to hold their board meetings in public and subject themselves to public meetings. The Sunshine or any other, that won't happen. And I don't think should happen unless they are given the same status. Right now, there has been a proposal that's being considered, and several business owners in one part of the community basically applied for the same kind of recognition